This video is the third and final part in the series going through the creation of my short film Snowfall. If you haven't seen it or parts 1 and 2 yet, go watch them and then come back to this video. This video is going to be all about compositing, color grading, and editing. As I mentioned in part 2, I rendered everything in ACES CG, which is now the default in Redshift and has been for a little while. After Effects also recently got native support for working in ACES without having the OCIO plugin, so it's a lot easier to work with now. Rendering in ACES gave me the ability to color grade and change the exposure a lot more easily and realistically. For example, the exposure rack in this first shot would be a lot more complicated without having an HDR render. But HDR footage, and especially raw ACES CG renders, look terrible. So in my color grading stack, I also convert them to SDR with the OCIO Color Profile Converter plugin. For color grading, I first used an instance of Red Giant's Magic Bullet Colorista to get the base color grade done. And then I used Magic Bullet Looks to add diffusion, halation, and some lens distortion to the shots. And then after that is when I convert it to sRGB. Then every shot got a little bit of Magic Bullet film and Mojo to make them look a little more interesting. And then I added a little bit more film grain using Magic Bullet Renoiser. And then on almost every shot, I used the depth path that I rendered out, which I mentioned in part 2 also, to add more fog to the scene along with what was already there from the Redshift environment object. There were a few shots that I did extra compositing on as well, especially the ones with the magic effects, which I show you how I did in part 1. I had to desaturate the blue because the smoke was pushing the blue and green to like very high values, like 20, and then the red going into the negatives. And then once Magic Bullet film was applied, it ended up looking really dark instead of looking like magic and bright and glowing. And then a lot of those I also put Red Giant optical glow on those to make them a bit brighter and more pretty. On this shot, I used the crypto matte that I rendered out to rotoscope the lightning, and then I added a bunch of effects to it. I added some like background blur, I added some distortion, and then I had like a bunch more like layers of that. I also rotated the smoke and color graded it a little bit to be a little better. Then on a bunch of shots, I also used the crypto matte to brighten or darken the character or some other parts of the scene, like on this one where I changed the character a little bit to stand out from the background more. Let's go to the title sequence, which was also done in 3D. It was done the same way as a lot of the other shots. But I made the lettering in Illustrator first based on a couple different fonts, but it's all hand-drawn. And then I imported that to Cinema 4D and extruded and beveled it. I had just some area lights that move around to highlight the letters, and then I did a similar set of color grading effect on that in After Effects. The render settings were basically the same. I also used a layer with Trapcode Particular on it to add some falling snow, and then added a lens blur and some turbulent displace on that. So that's it for this series. I hope you learned something from it, and subscribe.